So, before we jump into the questions, I would love for each one of you to introduce yourself and provide a description of the work that you do for the organization you represent. So, I will start off with Dr. Stephen Thomas.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, Dina, thank you so much. It's good to be reconnected with you over the years. I'm Stephen Thomas. I'm a professor in the School of Public Health at the University of Maryland, College Park, and I direct the Maryland Center for Health Equity. And my work is focused on translating the science of medicine and public health into culturally tailored, community-based interventions. And we have some lessons from the pandemic we're going to share with you here tonight.
I don't know how to. So, my name is Oya Gilbert. I am a multiple myeloma patient, survivor, diagnosed in 2017, the day after Christmas. And the foundation I represent is the Health, Hope, and Hip Hop Foundation. I am the founder of that, and we use hip hop, the culture, to teach health literacy and advocating in underrepresented communities. It's a different approach. We are in unprecedented times, so it calls for unprecedented advocating.
Rob.
Thank you. My name is Rob Long. I am the executive director in an organization called Uplifting Athletes. We leverage the platform of sports to build a community that invests in the lives of people impacted by rare diseases. So much like Oya uses the platform of hip hop, we use that power and platform of sports to engage communities around rare diseases.
Tiffany.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tiffany Scott. I am a master trainer for community health workers. I'm also the co-founder and current president and chair of the Maryland CHW Community Health Worker Association. And what I do there is that I train multiple CHWs, not just in Maryland, but nationally. And we go out into organizations and we help build infrastructures to say, this is what a CHW is. This is how they can be impactful in your organization and impactful in the community. And so that's what I do every day, and I love it. Thank you.
Thank you. George.
I am George Kerr. I'm an elder with Westminster Presbyterian Church in Southwest DC. And for the role today, because my full-time job is with G3 Associates, and I do community organizing on multiple levels, including substance use disorder and housing issues. And so I'll leave it there for now.
Thank you all. Okay, so I'm going to start off with a question for all of you. And I'll start with Dr. Thomas. You have done amazing work in the barbershop space at a community level. And you've really been able to really start at this very broad level of disease education and really pour that into the community. Can you share with us a bit as to how would one, and maybe in a rare disease community, how could they begin to figure out how they can take the same approach that you've taken? But before you answer, if you could share a little bit of the work that you do from the hair program.
Well, Dina, talking about hair, and we have a mixed audience here. It's about diversity, right? And I just want my friends to know that black barbershops and salons are not like Supercuts or the hair cutlery, all right? No self-respecting black barber say, I'll get you in and out in 10 minutes. And doesn't matter how much hair you have, all right? You're going to be there all day, all right? So you know what's rare? What's rare is the kind of conversation that you have when you trust somebody. Mm-hmm. You know what's rare? What's rare has happened right here today. Our hair network, Health Advocates in Reach and Research, has been operating for more than 15 years in this area, and we have barbers and stylists here today. Raise your hands back there, wellness warriors. There they are. So Fred, our lead barber, had to cut somebody's hair this morning, 7 a.m., because he said, I have to get down to this meeting at the Conrad. What are you going down there for, Fred? Rare disease. Fred's down in this hallway walking and meets this man's son who is in this meeting. That was a young man who just shared his last question that really opened this room up. Okay? I can't make this up. And when Fred saw him, he realized that what we're involved in cannot be made up. And Fred brought his mother, 84-year-old, hold on, mama, raise your hand, snap her up. And I'm saying that because that's really where it begins, how we treat one another with dignity and respect. And so we've discovered that the Black Barbershop is a place where we can bring health, not information, but also where we can learn from them about how to reach our community. And over the course of our talk today, we'll share with you how we've actually recruited for clinical trials, how we've redesigned recruitment materials to make them more culturally appropriate, and most importantly, how we've delivered the results of the science back to the community in a form that they understand. And you know what happens? They want more.
Thank you so much for that. And we are gonna delve deeper into that because I think that there's some great lessons that we can learn. Before I go to, I'm gonna skip down to George. Because again, it's more broad, it's HIV/AIDS, and the work that you do at Westminster. I'm a Southwest resident too, so really love the work that you're doing in our community. Can you share a bit about what that work looks like and if there's space to make that rare as well?
Well, I have a similar story because when I was walking in here, someone stopped me and she said, "Oh, you're from Westminster. You do all that public health work." And so, you know, it's all about that. And the uniqueness of Westminster is we're at arts. So we have a Friday night jazz and a Monday night blues. And that gets people in the door. And when they're in the door, then you can build these relationships and talk about substance use disorder. You can talk about HIV, chronic conditions, and everyone has a story. And I can't tell you how many times I've had people from the community call me and say, "I got this going on. I need help." I'm not a doctor. I don't play one on TV. So I'm very clear about that. But I also know that it's a place that we can also educate. And right now, where we are at, the anti-science that's happening, it's really important because with these rare diseases and HIV, substance use disorder, there's so much falseness out there. And if we were to get a cure for HIV, for example, we would have to educate them to say, okay, this is safe. And because we got so much politicalness in this, that it's making it extremely hard. And so I see that as one of my biggest roles right now in the community is saying, you have to trust these vaccines. You have to go get all your vaccines. Every time you go to the doctor, ask which one I need today.
Thank you. Tiffany, I'm going to jump to you again because I'm starting very broad and then we'll funnel down to Rob and Oya in the rear perspective. But you are a community health worker. You go out into the community and educate on a number of diseases. How do you think that there's space in that field of work to really incorporate rare disease? And is there an appetite that the community want to learn more about a rare disease? Or has it been your experience at all to even educate on rare disease?
Absolutely. There is definitely a space. There's definitely a hunger and a thirst to know more. A lot of the work that CHWs do is that we go into the communities and we educate and we advocate individuals who are misunderstood, oftentimes undiagnosed, right? They mama said this, daddy said this, cousin had this, I think I got this too. Mm-hmm. And then the world of Google, right? Everybody's playing MD and they're Googling all of these signs and symptoms and they're coming up with things and diagnosing themselves with things that they don't even have. And so there's always a space for CHWs to go in and to provide knowledge, to give wisdom, to walk alongside, because we just don't give the resources. We walk you through the process from the giving the resource, making the phone call, setting the appointment, attending the meeting, going to the follow-up, going to the surgery, going back to follow-up, like we do from the beginning to the end. As my grandmother used to say, from the rooter to the tutor. We go through the beginning to the end, and even after it's all said and done, we're still there to empower, right? Because after you finish this and after you've gotten through this hurdle or this barrier, this disease or this surgery, what are you going to do with this knowledge that you now have? So we're also helping them to advocate, right? And to encourage the next person. Because if we can reach one person and you reach one person, now we're at 2, then we're going to be at 4, then we're going to be at 6. And so continuing to get them to educate, to understand, and to know that we are there, we won't leave. And I think that gives us the space to do what we do and to do it the best way.
And after hearing that, I think that's a perfect space for rare disease, because that's exactly what we need. And I know that RDDC, Global Genes are actually developing programs and sponsorship opportunities that we are leveraging community health workers to do exactly what you spoke about.
I love it.
Yes, so I think that there's that space certainly there for the rare disease patients. Now I'm going to move to Oya and Rob. Starting off with Oya. Oya has an amazing diagnostic journey that he went through with multiple myeloma. I'd like for him to, and he's an amazing storyteller, so he has to tell that, yes you are. So I'd love for you to share sort of your journey and how you got to your diagnosis. And then we'll talk a little bit about what Health, Hope, and Hip Hop will do to support other rare disease patients get to their diagnosis.
Okay, well, first of all, I'm glad to be here, so thank you. So around 2015, I started experiencing what I consider a heart attack. Did what most people do, call 911, follow the process, get into the emergency room. And as I was in there, they said, hey, you had an anxiety attack. I said, well, what? Anxiety attack, panic attack. So we go back and forth, and he starts asking me about my life and stressed. And I said, man, this can't possibly be an anxiety attack because, I'm black. I would have had anxiety when I was like 10 years old or something. I've been stressed out. But in all seriousness, I did say that. And so we proceeded to go down this journey of going to specialists, sent me to a neurologist. Don't know why that happened when I thought I had a heart attack, but here we go. Just so you'd understand the backdrop of this, I live in a very rural, predominantly older white community, and not many black folks live there. So I went to every ologist you could think of, and this went on for a few years. And so what happened is I progressively started getting worse. I call them episodes. And at some point I believed that I did have anxiety, and I started taking the medication. And then I wound up getting into a car accident, and that put me back on the journey of, I didn't know at the time, advocating, but I was trying to figure out what was wrong with me. So fast forward, I'm experiencing these symptoms all day, every day. I'm in pain. I'm raising my 2 boys by myself in this area, and so I thought I was going to die. Well, I didn't think, I knew I was going to die. And so I decided to increase my life insurance policy, try to get some more money for my kids, just regular stuff. And when I did that, the thing that we hate about insurance companies and not covering pre-existing conditions is actually what saved my life. And so at that time frame, doctors never figured it out. At that point when I was diagnosed, 2 years later, the day after Christmas in 2017, I was diagnosed with multiple myeloma, something I had never heard of. And they told me it was incurable. I had never been sick in my life. I had never broke a bone. And there I was. And to be perfectly transparent with you, it was one of the weirdest feelings in the world. In one sense, I'm like, I told you, you know what I mean, that I had something. And I told you something was wrong with me. But then on the other hand, what was wrong with me, I had to deal with. So it really was tough. And I just thought about it a few weeks ago. I really never had time to process anything. It was like, oh yeah, now you have this disease. And then, like I said, I couldn't go to the doctor and be like, I told you, once I found all the ones I fired. But the point is I went through 4 primary doctors, a bunch of ologists, the same ologists. All of them were taking blood, so forth and so on, and urine samples, but just never figured it out. Unconscious bias. I'm not gonna say that these people were racist. That would be crazy for me to say that. But I will say that we have to do better, because I just happen to be blessed that I didn't die. 2 years of a delayed diagnosis of a cancer that only has 3 stages, or now it's all kinds of different things, but it is extremely aggressive. It's the number 2 cancer, blood cancer in the world, is killing black people. Affects us 2 to 1, and I ain't never heard of it. I told my family, even after I told them, they said multiple sclerosis, melanoma. I said, no, myeloma. But I can get deeper with that, but that's how my journey went. I am the poster child for delayed diagnosis, rural community, being misdiagnosed, and I'm just very thankful I'm here. And that was the seed that was planted that made me start the foundation.
And what will that foundation do?
So what we are doing and will continue to do is really, it's just a different. So the best way I can describe it is, when I decided to become an advocate, and I didn't decide it. It overtook me. But in that space, when I do things, I do it at a high level. And so I used to be in hip hop when I was in my younger days. I'm not a spring chicken. I'm more like a fall hen. And but I really was in the hip hop industry when I was 18. Fast forward now. When I discovered the dynamics of what was going on, I said, man, listen, it looks like, to me, what I can help and change is the delivery, how this message is delivered to our community. Yeah, we put indigenous people on a thing and black people on a piece of paper, but we still handing out this flyer. It's still what I consider that same antiquated thinking process. But however, if you're still talking about low participations in clinical trials and things of that nature, and it's like, I'm just becoming a cancer in this world, but it's 20, 30 years, we still talking about it. Can't keep doing the same thing, expecting a different result. So I decided to say, hey man, what is the soundtrack to my life? It's hip hop. Not only is it the soundtrack to my life, it's the soundtrack to all y'all lives. 60 on back to the child that's born. Now let's be clear, I'm talking about the original format of hip hop when it was created, not the new hip hop. No disrespect. But I'm talking about hip hop came from an underrepresented community. It was the voice. That's the reason why it was created. You had Public Enemy, you had Queen Latifah. So our foundation is using that same principle, but just bringing it to 2025. It's just like the wheel. It's still round. You can't change it, but it's not a stone anymore, it's rubber. So it's about the delivery mechanism, and our foundation uses the hip hop culture because it's touched every facet of this planet. There's third world countries that don't have water, but they know TikTok dances. You have to use that vehicle and use it in the right manner to teach health literacy, and we have started doing that. We partnered with Freeway and another kidney patient, and we made what we're calling the first time health advocacy hip hop songs. And you can go to I'm not trying to put a plug in, but the point is I'm one of those dudes that can show you better than I can tell you. And I know it was strange to the industry when I approached them about this concept, but we'll get a little deeper into that. I don't want to hog up the time, but that is what our foundation is doing, is using the hip hop culture. And it's not just music, it's dance, it's everything that's about it. It's the swag, everything, but use it for good.
Thank you, Oya. Okay, Rob, so tell me about your diagnostic journey and how you're bringing sports to engage community through your nonprofit.
Sure. Also super thrilled to be here, and truly hate that I have to follow that. I know, and it was true both times. So honored to be up here with all these wonderful people. So my journey started back when I was at Syracuse University. I was incredibly fortunate enough to play football at Syracuse. I received a scholarship coming out of high school to go to Syracuse, and it was absolutely a dream for me. And I was at Syracuse having a wonderful career there. I was the top punter and kicker going into the 2011 NFL draft. And my biggest concerns at that time were what NFL team was going to draft me and what city I was going to live in, and that's what I was focused on. And as my senior season progressed, I had these kind of random oddities that came up. Headaches. I had trouble seeing the board all of a sudden. Wasn't really feeling the best. would go to practice, and the lights in the Carrier Dome would all of a sudden seem so much brighter than they used to be. And then as we traveled throughout the year, I was starting to get very sick when we would fly, and talk to the trainers. They'd chalk that up to food poisoning, ate something wrong, whatever. Thanksgiving morning 2010, I woke up and was just unbelievably sick. I was throwing up, couldn't stop throwing up, and hadn't been out the night before, hadn't eaten anything abnormal. It was just something that I knew something wasn't right. And so I stopped long enough to get down to the training facility and talk to the doctors. I said, hey, the trainers, I said, something's wrong. And they said, all right, well, let's try to give me Pepto-Bismol and pretzel sticks, and started throwing that up. And so all of a sudden you're just like, something bigger is happening. And you have that kind of sense, that kind of horrifying sense of I'm losing control of my own body, of what's happening. And I actually felt a little bit better as the day wore on, and believe it or not, 2 days later, played in another game against. It was my final game at Boston against Boston College in the Carrier Dome, and 5 days after that, my girlfriend at the time basically was like, "Hey, I'm done watching you deteriorate," because she was the only one that was seeing this on this daily progression or regression happen over time. And so she said, kind of put her foot down, said, "You got to go and talk to somebody," because 22, I'm playing Division I football. I invincible. I'm staring dead face in the NFL, and this is going to be great. And so I went to the team doctor, and he looked at me and he said, "All right." And kind of doing the similar thing that happened to Oya. Are you stressed? Are you worried about this? Or the coaches too? And I was like, no. None of the above. And they said, all right, we'll start rolling some things out. And they sent me to have an MRI. And I went into the hospital, had an MRI. I'd never had an MRI before. The radiologist comes in, and about 5 minutes into the exam, she goes white, and she's like talking very quickly. And she's like, yeah, I just need to run some more tests. And I'm sitting there like, are you okay? Do we need to call somebody? And so I leave that MRI, and she goes, everything's gonna be okay. And I was like, all right, thanks, lady. And I go back to the team doctor that night, and I sit down, and I walk into the room. My coaches are there, and the entire training staff, and that's always meant that you had some season-ending injury, tore your ACL, whatever. And I said, this isn't good. And kind of trying to make a quip or a joke, and nobody laughed or anything. I was like, okay. And so sat down, and the doctor said, you have a large growth in your brain, and you need to see a specialist first thing in the morning. And so from there, I was like, it still didn't feel real. I was sitting there, it was fine. I played in a game 4 days ago. The next morning, I walked into the neurologist's office, and on the screen is my MRI, and I'd never seen a brain MRI before, let alone an MRI. And I'm saying, hey, what's that? What's this white part of the brain? They said, that's not supposed to be there. And it literally knocked me back. And the doctor walked into the room and said, hey, where are you from? And I said, from Philadelphia. And he said, you need to go home and be with your family, and there's good doctors there, and they'll take care of you. And I was like, what is happening? And so I go home, and 7 days later have emergency brain surgery. At this point, they're concerned with some major medical event. I hadn't had a stroke, hadn't had a seizure, and so I go in and go through this whole process, have the surgery, come out of surgery. It's the first time I don't have a headache in 3 months, and I don't realize that because your body just adapts and you just move forward. And I come through this and come out of that, and so I'm like, all right, I'm better, I'm good. And 6 days after that, I go back to get the pathology report, and I have a rare aggressive form of brain cancer. And doctors and nurses pull my parents aside and say, he's probably got 36 months to live. And so at that point, my world went from what NFL team to am I going to wake up the next morning. Went through 16 months of chemotherapy on an experimental chemotherapy at the time. And I got incredibly lucky. In so many different ways, so many different times, I got incredibly lucky. And my teammates started the Syracuse chapter of Uplifting Athletes in my honor. It was the greatest thing that's happened to me in my life. And I fell in love with the organization, what it did, what its mission was. And I learned that uplifting athletes, they leverage the platform of sports to build that community that invests in the lives of people impacted by rare diseases. I spent 4 years volunteering, advocating, fundraising for the organization, talking to the Syracuse team and the community, and then reached out. I said, this is my calling. I feel like I want to be here and do this. And so I started with the organization as the second employee, and 2 years later was promoted to the executive director role. And we've had a great ability to build more support through more teams and more engagement, and we launched programs called the Young Investigator Draft that funds research and uplifting experiences that provide opportunities for families and individuals impacted by rare diseases to engage with our network of athletes and athletic organizations. And now we sit here, and the organization itself has funded more than $1.2 million in research grants and served over 2,000 individuals impacted by rare diseases through the Experiences program. That was probably way too long, so I apologize.
No, it's good.
But,
because all of us in this room, we know the power of giving back. And all of you up here do exactly that every day. And I love that you and Oya took your disease and really gave back to the broader community. So kudos to you in that. And you, sir, I know the great work that you do under HARE. And you are a gatekeeper. You're all gatekeepers, quite honestly. I'm curious, as a gatekeeper, you typically focus on public health campaigns, large diseases. I want to hear about the public health campaign that you focus on, but then I'd like for both you and George to share with me how you go from that big space up here and how can we leverage the amazing work that you do in the rare disease community. Because I'm sure that a number of the folks in the audience, we know about these big diseases, but we're really, we are very focused in the rare space and committed. And we know that many of the tools that all of you are using can be applied. So we want to learn about the public health component, but then how do we apply that in a rare disease?
Well, first let me just say, wow, because you put a panel together, you put it in Zoom, and we're now meeting for the first time in person, and I just saw the audience, and you see the power of the story, and it's something that we're missing right now in the country. I got my Ebony and Ivory brothers here. Come on now. Can we not bring America back together again? All right? So you know what's rare, Dina? You know what's rare? What's rare is the power to convene. You have convened us here, and then you've allowed for the kind of safe space for the stories that you've just heard come out. And I think that's so important. So in many ways, it was a little idea that just grew. And I'll just simply go back to 2019, where we brought together barbers and stylists from across the country in a conference that was titled, What Black Barbers and Stylists Say to Researchers. No research on us without us. And folk from around the country came, and we were at in College Park, 2019, okay? What happened the following year? Okay, COVID. But that 2019 event was co-sponsored by the Multiple Myeloma Organization.
Oh, wow.
And they sent two spokespersons, two African-American men who had multiple myeloma. And they were telling their story to these black barbers, and Fred and Mike, they're all, you guys still back there? Raise your hands back there. They were there at the beginning, and that's when they first heard about multiple myeloma. My brother here, when he finally finds out what it is, had never heard of it before. It wasn't because he was in a rural area, it was because it was rare. And what the rare part is, the safe spaces for people to share their own stories. So over time, we've learned that yes, COVID really was our silver lining. And we learned that you need to be hyper-local. But our clinic events didn't feel like you were going to a clinic. They felt like you were going to a party. I'm hearing my brother down here. We had a DJ, we had music spinning, and food, and people came hesitant.
Where were they? Were they in the clinic?
They were literally in barbershops and salons that were turned into clinics. So all of our clinical partners came with all of their equipment and all their electronic records and everything. And they were just happy to see so many people there. And we told those that arrived who were hesitant, but they know the shop, and it's great food and great music, that now take all your myths and all that, conspiracy theory, take it inside. The doctors and nurses are in there, and ask them any question you want. And they came hesitant. And they left hesitant, but vaccinated. We didn't have to change their worldview. We did not have to change their political affiliation. So the lesson was treat people with dignity and respect. Bring the services to where they are. And our barbers and stylists who are here today are also certified community health workers, but they work behind the chair. And we also make sure that we have medical oversight. So we have one of our clinicians here, raise your hand, Dr. Ritter, from the State Medical Society. And again, all made possible during the pandemic. Think about it. Pandemic hit, nobody had time to write a proposal per se. We came together and worked together, didn't we? And as a result, we met our pharmaceutical partners. Sometimes the pharmaceutical is seen as the big enemy. We had partnerships now. We brought them into the barbershops and salons, and they recognized this is another way of reaching a community that is not participating in research. So we've continued that partnership. And our barbers and stylists are sometimes part of the diagnosis. When we started doing the lupus work, they were the ones letting people know your hair is falling out, you need to talk to someone. So these are sentinels in the community that need to be recognized as important parts of the public health infrastructure. So rather than a gatekeeper, I want to be a bridge builder.
There you go.
We're going to build bridges, building trust, building bridges, building healthy communities, and bringing even more services and training to the barbers and stylists. Right now, they've completed their training as certified diabetes care coordinators. So I would say that what's rare is the space, the trusted space for the conversation, and what's rare is scaling it, because there are barbershops and salons all across the United States in all kinds of neighborhoods that can be brought into the network. And as I told you a little bit, thank you, young man, raise your hand there. I called him out because I told you your dad got his hair cut this morning. And your question was just so wonderful. That with the barbers, we've learned that they really follow their clients from the first time they get that haircut on a high chair to that child having children and that children having children. That's the relationship they have. So our clinical partner said, I wish I had that relationship with my patients, but you can't do it in 15 minutes. So what's happening in the country right now is a destruction of the foundations of our scientific enterprise. I don't think it can be completely destroyed in less than 100 days, but it has been shaken, and there are cracks that we need to repair. But there are also cracks from which we can grow. So we're looking at different models, and I think we can learn from the rare disease community because of the powerful advocacy you have. Each of your journeys, I'd never thought of it that before. A patient odyssey, you didn't say journey, odyssey, like going into space, shows the broken places of our healthcare delivery system, okay? That's not happening in other countries. It's happening here in America. Why? They can help us find those broken places. And as someone has said, you can become stronger in the broken places, but you have to have the stories. And I think our barbershops and salons are an excellent place to start. So we are reaching out for partners right now so that we can actually build bridges for our community to actually participate in clinical trials. When we did our survey research with them, you know what they said? Nobody asked us. And why do they not ask? Because I don't want somebody in my protocol that might not follow directions. I don't want somebody in my protocol who can't keep their medication under refrigeration, and you might drop out. So I'm not even going to ask him. So I think we have to work on both ends, the education with the community, but also with the researcher, and addressing those preconceived biases. For my brother here, maybe it was because of the pigmentation, but what about my brother here? What was that all about? So the assumptions and the biases can work in both directions. You look great, you're fine. And the rabbit holes, who could have ever have imagined? So I think that in the rare disease space, we truly have the stories to identify the broken places in our healthcare delivery system. And for minority communities, for them to recognize that the legacy of the U.S. Public Health Service syphilis study done at Tuskegee from 1932 to 1972, 40 years, during the pandemic, the ancestors came out and did a public service ad. Raise your hand if you saw the legacy, stories of our fathers. See? I'll make sure you get that. You know what they said?
What?
Don't let the suffering of our family members be your excuse for not being vaccinated. Don't let the suffering of our family members be the excuse for you not participating in a clinical trial. Remember, our family members were denied treatment for 40 years. What we now need to do is atone for that. And that means making things better. So we should go out of our way to make it easy for people of color and all those who've been left out to participate in clinical trials. And they shouldn't hear about it for the first time when they're being diagnosed or being told they have a life-threatening disease. And that's what's happening sometimes. Let them hear about it in the barbershops and the beauty salons. And if these mics gets going around, they're going to tell you the kind of clinical research that we need to be doing. Now we're working together, right?
There we go. And as you were talking, I was thinking, you know, even in the rare disease space, multiple rare disease organizations can have a barbershop or a beauty shop day to learn about more rare diseases. So thank you for that. So George, I visit Westminster on Friday Night Jazz. And I know that it's a great place to bring the community together. In that space, is it also possible to go beyond that reach of HIV/AIDS and go a little more rare? Can we take that type of approach?
You know, I'm sitting up here listening, and I've been in this almost 35 years of advocacy around HIV. I don't use the words AIDS anymore because there's stigma with it. It's HIV or the advanced stages of HIV. And so the barbershops, we've been doing that for such a long time. And that's how we got condoms out into the community. That's how we're educating a PrEP and DoxyPEP right now, utilizing community health workers in this work. So it's a lot of flashbacks right now. And unfortunately, I wasn't on the Zoom to meet you all because I was at AIDS Watch and listening to the community. And the community is really hurt right now. They're scared, and we just don't know, you know. With some of these policies that are happening, it's gonna kill people. It already has killed people, particularly overseas with all of our USAID programs. And so going back to Westminster and the work there, yes, I have people come up to me all the time talking about, you know, I've got this going on, I got that, and we have to connect them. And there's programs out there like Living Well with Chronic Disease. I was a certified trainer until DC stopped providing it. That is an incredible workshop, and I still have, this is pre-COVID, I still have some of the people that I taught calling me today saying, just check it, you know, everything's going good. I had one person call me, he said, George, I need to call you back tonight because my wife wants to talk to you. And so it's building these relationships one-on-one that is so key. And once you do that, it expands so far. You just, it's really hard to imagine, but it really is extraordinary. And when we're up there talking, because I talk from the stage sometimes about the overdose crisis here in DC and the opiate and the amount of deaths that's happening, particularly with older black men that are dying, and no one wants to pay attention to that. But it's really key and happening. And it's interesting because all of a sudden I'll be talking And then I'll be saying this stuff, and then afterwards I'll go off the stage and go, where did that come from? And that's truly my faith talking through me to educate everyone. So it's just about building these relationships and maintaining them. And right now, with all the antitrust out there, we have to continue building on that trust.
Thank you. I'm going to do one more question, and I'm going to then allow the audience to ask questions. But I want to end with each one of you kind of sharing your thoughts on where we are today, picking up to where you just left off. We know that there's an attack on DE&I, and we're a Rare Disease Diversity Coalition. We focus on rare disease. We focus on diverse communities, and we want to be a resource for them. And I know that our communities have always relied upon community to get us through. And whether that's sickness, whether that's politics, whatever that may be, we've always kind of hung into community. So when we think about that, and we think about all of the bridge builders that you all are, how does your bridge, and that bridge is your organization or the work that you do, how will that bridge help us through in these times of uncertainty and around DE&I? Because it's science that we believe in, and it's science that we're trying to get to, but we're having this sort of attack on just that. So I'm curious, and I'm going to start with you, Oya. What do you believe health, hope, and hip hop, how can they serve as that community bridge to get us through these times we're facing?
I mean, for starters, we're just in a very unprecedented time, and I think it's important for everybody to know that it's really about working together, putting aside our whatever, even our branding, we're all so stuck on that. We're in a society of likes and things of that nature, but I think it's really just important for us to understand that we collectively have to work together. And I know we use the word partnership, but I like to use the word alliance. We have to create alliances, and if you think one of the great examples is NATO. And when you think about it, it's people from all different backgrounds, religion, whatever, but they all come together and put all that aside for one common goal, whatever that might be. And I feel like our foundation is geared for that. And it's based on the fact of a lot of things that everyone said. When you think about the barbershop situation, you think about old school doctors, the reason why it was easy is because you had a relationship. You had typically in the old school days, you had the same doctor till you was born till you went away. Now, as you stated so eloquently, we got KPIs, 15 minutes. Don't get this twisted. Hospitals have KPIs too. It's a business. And so what I believe, as far as our foundation and everybody, is I'm trying to focus about bringing the humanity portion back into it. I think that's what's been removed out of it, and why we are so desensitized with the situation where, once again, it's all about metrics and things of that nature. And when you're on the block and you're from the hood, there's no metrics there. We're not measuring anything. We understand the gauge and the temperature of the city, the climate of our environment, and we operate as such. And so our foundation and what I hope to do is the ability for me, because I can go from the barbecue to the boardroom, and you have to have that ability to navigate in those spaces. And there's a bunch of me's, there's a bunch of hims, and all over the United States, and we have to identify those people and collectively come together as center of influences to attack and stick together and combat what's going on in this political climate. That's the only way to stop this. We got to be able to stand firm, and I'm a firm believer in God. We got to be able to stand firm and let nothing move us, and then we got to do what we got to do. That's my short version.
Rob?
So I think for us, and kind of just going off what Oya said, I think the only way to get past your difficult times is to get through them and stay the course. And I think that's what we are going to do, we're going to continue to invest in the next generation of researchers, and including our underrepresented researchers in medicine initiative, including accessible opportunities for people impacted by rare diseases to come to our uplifting experiences, continuing to engage with the next generation of leaders and educating them on the importance of the rare disease cause. Just because people want to attack abbreviations or whatever you want to call it, acronyms, it doesn't mean they don't exist. The people are still very much here, and those populations are very real. And I think for us, as a community, I think we've all sat up on this stage. We've been through tough times. The only way to get through that is by staying the course, one foot in front of the other. The sun will come up tomorrow. Days won't be easy, but you keep moving forward. And then, in time, you can look back at all the great work that's been accomplished. I think, the previous panel talking about policy, all the great work you organizations do, that stuff doesn't happen overnight. These things take time, and administrations will change, Congresses will change, but the people, we're here, and you have to stay that course. And I think, the day-to-day can be difficult, but I think at the end, when you have the opportunity to look back, we'll be in a better place if we keep moving forward.
I think we all talked about trust, but I think that's what CHWs do so frequently, all the time, is that we build that trust. Trust is such a valuable asset and tool to public health. And I think what CHWs bring to the table is that we have that trusted relationship with our communities. We dispel myths every single day. We provide information and education. Health literacy and low health literacy is real. It is real. Regardless of all the alphabet soup behind your name, it doesn't matter when it comes to healthcare. And so being able to be that bridge for the social services system, to our healthcare systems, and to our communities, maybe even doing some code switching if necessary, to make sure that people get the information that they need. Because when they have the information, they will do better. But because they don't have the information, or it's skewed, or they got bits and pieces because mama and them or somebody said this, and they don't understand it in its totality, and then they're too embarrassed to ask the physician to explain because they, for some reason, think they're supposed to know the medical term. That's when CHWs show up and bring the light. We build that trust, we build those relationships, and we empower and to support them through their journey. And then we also give them the tools to amplify their own voices, because we want to help them, but we can't help them for forever. So we have to give them the tools that they can then go out and amplify and advocate for what they need. And then again, they share that with somebody else, and before you know it, we're going to have a world full of CHWs.
All right, amen. George.
So I'm going to switch my hat and go to my community coordinator for the DCC, for our Center for AIDS Research. And my role is to really be the bridge between research and the community. And one thing that I've been able to do in this position is I've taken us from the table to in the kitchen, where we as community have to be in the kitchen when things are developed. When it gets to the table, it's already been decided. Okay? And when we're doing this research, there's got to be a partnership. So a community and the researcher, because the researchers don't know everything. They got all this book knowledge. And when I'm talking to early stage investigators, I tell them, come into the community, don't come to the front row, start in the back, and start building your way up and building that trust. And that's how you get into the community. And we cannot say this enough. We need to use the word empathy, because we've lost that term. When we start doing all this anti-stuff, we're leaving that all behind. And everyone up here has empathy, and we need to bring that back.
Thank you. All right.
Well, yeah, I just have to say, wow, you know, because I'm so glad the recording's going on back there, because you basically have a master class of what we need to do, okay? It's not that complicated. But we're going to be distracted, and certain terms are being weaponized. So just one example from our work in the community, when the public health people came, and the need for everyone to be vaccinated, they talked about herd immunity. Herd immunity. It's open up the textbooks, herd immunity. And you need a certain proportion of the herd to be vaccinated to keep everybody healthy. Well, it was February, Black History Month. Can you imagine what's on the TV? Harriet Tubman bringing people out of slavery. People treated like chattel. You know what the barber said to me? He said, Dr. T, we are not animals. What's this herd immunity? I tried to explain it again. And they said, well, that sounds like community immunity. And that became the t-shirt. We need to translate some of our science into language the community understands that doesn't distort the meaning. That's what we're talking about here. That's how you treat people with dignity and respect, and they know you're listening. Community immunity, all of our materials change. The t-shirts change, the models change, and we have a process for how to get that done using human-centered design. So our next step as an educational institution is how do we bring co-creation methods to the community so we co-create solutions. And that's what we're doing right now. And I'll just leave with this one thing, because I think you've heard it all across the board here, and I would simply call it love. We need more love. But I'm defining love in this way: leaving others very encouraged. So get over the other stuff. It is about love, leaving others very encouraged. And the more we do that, the more we can come together in spaces like this and have the truth-telling that you've heard here today. I feel very honored and blessed, Dina. Thank you so much.
Thank you, my friends. You are amazing. You brought so much life and energy to this room, and I am eternally grateful to all of you. Thank you so much.